Hey guys, how's it going? Welcome to my beginner guide to World of Warcraft. If you've never played the game before, I'm going to touch base on some very basic information that you may have questions about within the game. Let's go ahead and jump on into it. Alright guys, first things first, we're going to address this issue of servers. Now there are two types of servers. There's normal and there's role-playing. Really doesn't matter if you're interested in role-playing. A lot of the role-playing servers are fairly set up for that. And then normal just being the ones that you play normally. There are different types of populations. There's high, there's low, there's medium, there's new players, and then there's full. Now, new players, a lot of people are going to be thrown into new players. All this means is it's the population on the server. So if you're a newer player, you're going to these servers, there's going to be less people, and there may even be less people to help you out. So if you're new to the game, I would recommend picking kind of a medium level server, maybe doing some research on what guilds are in what area. High and full, not to say that you should avoid high and full, they are still going to be full of players, and they're still going to be full of good players. So pick a server that you feel is the most comfortable for you, and you'll just kind of hang out and have some fun with that. Now, as it pertains to PvP within particular servers, if you go to your talents or you press N, it'll bring up your specialization or your talents, which we will talk about a little bit later. In the lower right hand corner here, there's this thing called War Mode. You have to go to your major cities. War bonus increases reputation, experience, and money gain by 25% when you activate it. Your little character is going to do a fist bump in the air, and that's how you know that War Mode is activated. And you'll have this little enlisted buff. It says experience and completing quests increased by 25%, which increases everything that you get from quests. If you have that turned on, you're able to engage and fight the opposite faction at any given time. However, there's also this little sigil to the left of your plate. Your plate may be up here in the upper left-hand corner. I move it down here just for my own accessibility. If you go to player versus player, there's this enable and disable here. If you enable it, you'll be able to be engaged by the opposite faction. However, the opposite faction will also have to have it enabled for you to engage them. Now, War Mode, the nice part about War Mode is if you have War Mode enabled, you'll be able to engage the opposite faction at any given time, and it kind of engages the world PvP and encourages PvP while you have it on. If you're looking for more detailed information on the servers that you're going to be picking, I can leave this in the description. More importantly, this breaks down populations, ranks, and what servers have what. Unfortunately, they are broken into PvE and PvP and RP. Servers are just normal and RP at this time, but when you look at them, we'll give you kind of a decent idea of what has High Alliance, what has High Horde, and kind of what you are going to be interested in playing to help you pick what server you would like to play. I will leave that link down in the description. Now that we've kind of picked our server, one thing that I want to point out is every race here on the left between the Alliance and the Horde is going to have racial traits. Make sure that you pay attention to what these racial traits are and how they're going to help you based on the class that you pick. One thing that I also do want to point out is these 5 allied races here in the middle between the races that are available to you are more than likely going to be grayed out, like I have over here on the Horde, because what you have to do is you have to unlock them within the game by completing a quest at max level, and then those classes will be available to play. Now that we've kind of broken down the racial abilities, let's talk about the different classes. Now there are 12 different classes within the game, and each are going to fall under a different category when we think about the trinity of MMOs, right? So the trinity is tank, ranged and melee DPS, and healers. So let's go ahead and break those down into their different sections, and you can try to make those decisions based on what you feel like doing within the game. Now there are 6 tanking classes within the game: the warrior, the paladin, the monk, the death knight. Now the demon hunter is going to be locked behind the night elf racial, and the druid. Now each of these classes are going to have something different, with druids using shape-shifting, monks using ability called stagger, demon hunters and death knights using kind of their own self heals, and warriors and paladins are going to be kind of mid-tier in the middle, where they use heals and they use mitigations to keep themselves alive. There are 5 healer classes within the game. Some of them we may see overlap with some of the classes that we previously mentioned. I'm currently on Paladin. Holy Paladins are good at direct healing. Priests have 2 different specializations, Holy and Discipline. Discipline does healing based on the amount of damage that they do. They're fairly decent to bring for heals, but if you're looking for a little bit of that extra edge for damage as well. And then Holy Priests are very good for healing, much like a Paladin. They're very good for direct healing, but they also have fairly strong AoE healing. Now, Shamans use totems to assist with healing, as well as they have good AoE heals, such as Chain Heal. Monk healers are very good at AoE healing, but they also have very good single target cooldowns. They're very strong abilities that they have that can help keep tanks alive. Now druids also have very good AoE heals, which as you see here, that's the ability called Tranquility, but they also have transformations that can increase their heals, but they also have something called HOTS, or heals over time. Now they are probably the strongest class for their heals over time when compared to the other classes. Now last but certainly not least, this is the third part of the Trinity, the damage dealers. Now every class is going to have the ability to be a damage dealer, but whether it's ranged or melee, let's go ahead and break that down right now. So warriors have 2 specializations for DPS, but they're purely a melee class, much like you would find in many other MMOs. Now a hunter class, however, is purely DPS, and they have 2 ranged specializations, but they also have a melee specialization. So if you're interested in kind of a range or melee class, hunter would be for you. Mage is your very stereotypical mage, dealing arcane, fire, frost damage from far away. Rogue is a melee specialization, using damage from the stealth to kind of be something a little bit different. It's very stereotypical like you would see in other games, stealthing around, being sneaky. Shadow Priest, one of our stronger healers, also has a fairly strong ranged DPS spec. So if you're looking to be a healer and a ranged DPS, Priest may be for you. Now Warlock is purely ranged DPS. They use little minions to attack and fight other people, and they use powers from beyond. Paladin is purely melee DPS. So if you're looking to be a healer, tank, DPS, Paladin may be the class for you. Now Druids have melee and range, so you can be all 4 classes with the Druid. As you've seen, they've fallen under every single one of these lists. You will use Feral Form to be melee DPS, and you will use an ability called Moonkin, which will turn you into like a giant fat chicken. Shamans also have the ability to be melee and range DPS, which they use their totems to increase their damage. If you want to be a dual wielding kind of elementalist, then this may be the class for you. Monks have melee DPS as well, and they use Fists of Fury, which you saw there as kind of one of their main abilities to deal quite a bit of damage. Demon Hunters and Death Knights are purely melee classes as well, and you also have the ability to tank with them, so remember to keep that in mind if you're looking to dual specialization. So now that we've kind of wrapped up kind of the classes, let's go ahead and jump into Exiles, Reach versus Starter Zone, kind of touch on some basic controls, your Hearthstone, and the level squish. Now, after you've finished creating your character, you will come to a screen like this. You'll have them all customized, ready to go, and you'll have picked a name. You'll get 2 choices. You'll get to either go to Exiles Reach, or on the right hand side is going to be a different starter area depending on what race you are and your faction. So I picked a human, so Northshire Valley is going to be my option here. Now, I would normally agree with everybody when they say to pick Exiles Reach if it's your first time playing the game. Exiles Reach is a great starter area. However, after playing Exiles Reach as somebody who has been playing the game for a while, I'm actually going to say that you should pick your race's starter area, and I'll tell you why. We're going to talk about mounts a little bit later within the game, but the way that the mount system works is you're going to get a new mount at level 10, and when you're done with Exiles Reach, you're going to be level 10, and it's going to dump you into Stormwind. Unless you're a human, you're not going to be able to get a particular mount. And if it's your first time playing the game, you're going to be mountless until level 30, unless you go to your race's faction capital. Now what that means is if you're an Orc and you go to Orgrimmar, you will have access to the mounts there. If you're a human and you go to Stormwind after Exiles Reach, you're going to have access to the horses. However, if you're a Draenei or a Dwarf and you go through Exiles Reach and you go to Stormwind, you'll have the ability to buy the training to ride the mount, but you will not have the ability to buy a horse from the breeder there. You'll have to go to Ironforge or Draenor, or Exodar, and that is quite the walk for somebody who's never played the game before. So I would recommend using your starter area, doing the quest levels there to level 10. You'll be around where your particular race's mount vendor is. You'll be able to buy the training, you'll be able to buy the mount without having to do a whole lot of extra stuff. And once you hit level 10, you'll be able to go to a hero board, and you'll be able to kind of figure out where you're supposed to go from there, whether it's the newest expansion that's kind of released or it's an entirely different area altogether. Now let's kind of touch base on some more basic information. I realize I kind of threw a lot of information at you guys there for a second when trying to determine where you wanted to go. You're in the starter area, you're level 1, you virtually don't have anything. So now let's go ahead and let's talk about the level squish that's recently happened. World of Warcraft is a fairly large game with a lot of expansions. Now Shadowlands squished the levels of the characters down from 120 down to 50 for pre-patch, and then 60, you'll be level 60 in Shadowlands. Now with that being said, there's a whole lot of content to experience here within World of Warcraft that you will potentially not be able to get to prior to reaching max level. So I want to talk about something called Chromie. When you hit level 10, you will have the option to go to one of the major cities. A lot of people are going to tell you that you need to do the Chromie time. Now, Chromie is going to be represented on the minimap by this little hourglass here. When you approach her, she's going to be this little gnome sitting on what looks like a giant hourglass. When you walk up to her and you talk to her, she will give you the option to select a timeline. Now, this is only going to be available if you've leveled a character to level 40 before. So if you haven't leveled a character to level 40 before, you're going to go to that hero board that we talked about earlier, and they're going to send you to a particular location, whether it's the current expansion or whatever is the closest helpful for your level. Make sure you go talk to that hero board. Now, this is getting a little bit ahead of ourselves, but I did want to mention that there's a lot of content that you may not be able to get access to. So let's talk about some keybinds. The basic keybinds as far as movement and opening things will be available to you. You have this little micro bar down here in the lower right hand corner. I'm going to go through each of these, their keybinds, what it means to open them, and what the information means within them in the following content. Alright guys, first things first, that very first thing on your micro bar is actually your character sheet. It's keybound to C. When you pull it up, you'll be able to see kind of a bunch of different information. You'll see item level here at the top. All that is it averages out the item level of the gear that you're currently wearing into a particular number. This will become important as you get further on in the game, maybe closer to rating. You have a titles button here. I have particular titles here because I've been playing the game for a while. You may not have a title, but we'll talk about achievements and getting titles, doing certain quests. And you have an equipment manager, so when we talk about specializations later, I will mention this as well. This is where you can put different sets of gear together. So if I add a new set, it's going to take the set that I'm currently wearing and it's going to allow me to create one. So I could just say, let's call it leveling gear. Okay. Now when I click on it, I'm wearing the gear. It's going to tell me down in the lower right there what items I've equipped. I have all 15 items equipped. Now, when you go back to your character sheet, there's 4 things you need to be aware of as far as the enhancements. Critical Strike, Haste, Mastery, and Verse. Those are the 4 main skills and ability traits within the game. That's what you're going to kind of want to be paying attention to. Now, based on your class, based on your race, and based on your specialization, will determine which of those you would like to pick. So if you would like to be an enhancement shaman versus a elemental shaman, which is what I currently am at the moment, stacking intellect is going to be big for enhancement, so this trait will change to agility if I was enhancement, but then my priorities down here would also change based on my enhancement specialization or my elemental specialization. Now let's go ahead and jump into some professions. As far as the professions go, on your microbar, if you press P, it'll bring up the professions in spellbook. Now if you don't have any abilities down on your bar, it's going to have this gold kind of square around it. If I just click, move it, I can place it down on my bar. If you have your bars locked, you shift click hold it and move it off, and that is how you get it off. You're going to have general abilities, shaman general abilities, or your class general abilities, and then you're going to have 3 specializations because each specialization is going to have different types of abilities. Now, the professions tab, there are 11 different professions within the game. I'll just kind of list some pairs that you can kind of have while you're within the game, and you can kind of make a decision for yourself. If you go speak to a guard within any sort of major city, you'll be able to pick up these professions. However, I would recommend that you wait until you get to the current expansion, because if you pick it up before you get to the current expansion, you're going to find that the abilities are going to end up, the amount of leveling that you're going to have to do is going to end up resetting, because each expansion is going to have its own type of profession level that you're going to need to level up within that particular expansion. So if you wait till the current expansion, whatever expansion that happens to be, before you pick up the profession that you want to level, you'll be fine. You'll start at 0 and you'll be able to level it up to 100 or 175, whatever the max is for that particular expansion, and you'll be able to make max level gear based on the current content. So if you're a plate wearer, you can do blacksmithing and mining. If you wear leather or mail, you can do leather working and skinning. If you wear cloth, you can do enchanting and tailoring. However, cooking, fishing, and archaeology, those 3 will always be available to you no matter what class you happen to be, and you'll be able to kind of use those abilities to make food or dig up old heirlooms within the game. Now let's kind of move on to specializations. I know I've mentioned those quite a few times, so let's go ahead and jump into that information now. Now specializations, if you push N on your keyboard, it will bring up talents and specializations. You get your first specialization at level 10 and you get your first talent at level 15. So if you're below level 10, this screen will not pull up at all. If you're below level 15, you will not have this talents page at all. Now specialization is just like the Trinity, like we talked about earlier. DPS, healer, or tank, depending on the class that you chose. It will depend on what kind of part of the Trinity you'll be able to play a part in. Now you can change your specialization at any time, no matter where you are within the world. However, if you want to change your talents, you're going to have to go to a major city or an inn. You'll get little Z's over your level and you'll be able to change your talents that way very easily. Now I'm going to try to cover mounts next, and then we will cover the rest of the microbar fairly quickly. Let's go ahead and wrap this up. Now as far as mounts or collectibles go in the game, Shift P is kind of the general keybind. It'll bring up your mounts and what's available to you. Now level 10, you'll be able to get your first rideable mount, which we talked about earlier. You're going to have to go to kind of your own faction and your own race's capital to get your first rideable mount, which is why I recommended that you go to the race's starter area versus doing Exile's Reach. This is the mount that I'm currently on at the moment, and every other mount that I have on here you can kind of see up and down on here as well. Now if you go to Pet Journal, there are pets that you can play with here within the game. You can collect the little pets and play games with them that way. You have toys that you can collect throughout the game that do some pretty cool things. Heirlooms, I wouldn't worry about this tab very much. If you're brand new to the game, you can collect and buy things for your alts or your alternative characters. If you're new to the game, buying these things isn't going to be available to you, and it's really not going to help you that much. Now if you hear anybody say anything about transmog, which I will talk about later, this is kind of the tab where you'll be able to see kind of the different things that you have. The ones that are kind of not so grayed out are the ones that you have access of, and the ones that are grayed out are the ones that you do not have access to, but it will tell you where they drop and how you can get them. So this is a Corrupted Gladiator Chain headguard. It's a quest. It's something that I'm going to have to get by being a gladiator or by doing PvP here within the game. So I'm going to go ahead and finish up this microbar, and then I'm going to leave you guys with some tips. And we're just going to wrap up this microbar. If you press Y, it'll bring up the achievement page. On the left hand side, it'll kind of tell you what the different sections are: PvP, dungeons, professions, reputations, and if you have the achievement, it'll show you. If you don't have the achievement, it'll show you how close you are to getting it and what you need to do to get it done. The bottom will be different types of guild challenges, and then the statistics tab will kind of tell you how many kills you have, what kind of character stats you have, how many deaths you've got, and from what. Travel, your social, your player versus player, pet battles, etc. Things like that. Fairly simple things to look at, but kind of fun to see. If you press L or M, it'll bring up the maps. Right now I'm at the Dark Portal over in the Blasted Lands. On the right hand side, I'll show you where the quests are. Now these quests are all the way over in Kul Tiras. If I click on it, it'll tell me to take the portal, because that's going to be the fastest way according to the map to get to where I need to go. Now obviously I can just hearth out of here and go back and I'll be fine, but it'll tell you where you're supposed to be on the map when you're in those zones. If you press J, it'll bring up your guild or your communities. If you're not in any, you can use the guild finder or the find a community button, and you'll be able to kind of search for what you need to do by relevance filter and what they are looking for, whether it's a guild or a community. Now if you push I, it will bring up the party finder for dungeons and raids. Now this is a cool thing that you can do to find people to run dungeons with if you're trying to do a particular quest, or if you just want to level up fairly quickly without having to worry about questing through all the zones. However, dungeon finder is not available until level 10, and certain dungeons aren't available until certain levels. Raid finder and pre-made groups over here are not going to be available until the max level. Player versus player, same thing. Rated and pre-made groups aren't going to be available until level 50, but you can do random battlegrounds, arena skirmishes, epic battlegrounds, and then right now there's the anniversary event going on that you're able to do. It'll show you your honor level and how many kills that you have on that particular character. If you push Shift J, it'll bring up this adventure guide. Now the adventure guide will tell you where you can go, what you should do, and what will help you kind of play in the game, and have suggested content that you can play within the game as well. So here it's suggesting that I do secondary professions, because I don't have any professions at the moment. It has dungeons and raids for the current content, so you can click on it. It'll tell you the information that you need for particular bosses. You click on the boss, it'll tell you what you need to pay attention to, what the abilities are. You can figure out what the loot is, and if that loot's any good for you, you can look at the abilities and it'll show you a model of what those particular people look like. Now last but not least, if you press O, it'll bring up the social tab where you can kind of see all your friends list. It'll show you your battle tags. So this is my particular battle tag. If you're somebody who's new to the game and you have any questions for me, feel free to add me, send me a whisper, and we can definitely have a conversation. Down here at the bottom you also have the Who tab, so you type /who, it'll kind of tell you who's in the Blasted Lands around your level. Currently I'm the only one in here. If you ended up in a raid, pressing O and going to raid, it'll tell you the composition, who has leader, who has assist, what group that you happen to be in within the raid. There are 8 different groups that you can be in. If you go to the quick join down here at the bottom, it'll tell you what groups your friends are joining and what those groups happen to be doing. So now we've kind of covered everything. We've kind of covered all the basics. I really hope that you kind of understand what's happening within the game when you understand the microbar. I'm just going to jump into some tips and tricks and things that I've kind of noticed as I've played a long time on this game, and I'm going to introduce those to you now. Real quick, before I give some tips and tricks, let's talk about your inventory briefly. Now, there are many different types of item qualities within the game. Gray items can be sold directly to vendors for money. They'll have this little gold bar above them. Now, if you have white, like this mysterious meat or this lean wolf flank, there are crafting reagents within the game, and you can use them for cooking. You can use linen cloth and wool cloth for tailoring. So just be aware of those. Those are the different kinds of qualities within the game. Now, the quality based on the color, so green is the most uncommon, or it could particularly be a crafting uncommon material like this malachite. You will go to blue, which is rare. Purple is epic. So blue is rare, purple is kind of epic, and then there are orange items within the game which are determined as legendaries. So make sure that you're paying attention to the quality of the items within your inventory. If they're white and you feel like you may end up using them later on, keep them, put them in your bank, hold on to them for a little while. Otherwise, there is instance dropped loot within the game. So when you get it, you're going to get this little message underneath it that says it is tradable within 2 hours to other people within your group. Make sure that nobody else within the group needs it, because once you equip that piece of item, you will no longer be able to trade it to people within your group. So group that you get within instances, if you don't need it, make sure you communicate with your group. If somebody else does need it, whether they're on the same server as you or not, you will be able to trade that to them if they were in the dungeon when the boss died. Now I'm going to give you some tips and tricks about interface, and then we're just going to kind of go through some miscellaneous stuff, and then we'll wrap this video up. I'm just going to very briefly touch base on some interface tips and tricks or things that maybe you don't realize. So down here on the bottom, you see I have all these extra interface action buttons down up on the screen, right? So if you press escape, or if you click on this little question over here, it'll bring up this menu here. You're going to click on the interface button, and it's going to bring up these different kind of areas that are going on, right? So if you go to any of these buttons, so combat, target of target is something that I have turned on, your focus, self-cast button, or you can do auto self-cast, display, so what do you want to show, chat bubbles, what do you want to show, something easy like that. Now if you go all the way down here to action bars, this is where you're going to be able to turn on the action bars, right? This is where I have my action bars locked, so I can't accidentally pull anything off, which is why I have to shift click. You can turn on the bottom left, the bottom right, and then both of these right bars over here. So that makes it fairly easy, so you can have a little bit more kind of buttons to go off of and a little bit more things to play with. Now something else that I would like to show you is how to move your frames, right? So I talked about moving this, so if you right click on it, you go down to move frame, you click unlock frame, and you'll be able to move this frame kind of anywhere that you would like. So unlock frame, usually what I do is I click the target, and then you can move this wherever that you want. Now I typically like to have mine kind of right by me, kind of in the middle of the screen, but I've been tanking for such a long time that I don't know that I'm going to be able to change the way that I do my thinking. The last thing that I want to let you know is if you kind of have interface issues, or if you're lagging, or if you install something, or if you decide to get add-ons, all you have to do is type /reload, RELOAD, into the chat. It'll reload your screen. It'll look something like this. You'll get kind of a basic chat, basic picture up on the screen. Screen will reload. This is kind of what you'll come back to. If it doesn't fit, if it fixes what you're having issues with, great. If not, you may have to end up relogging, but I know doing the /reload is a question I've actually had pop up a couple times for some of the newer players within the game. This way you don't have to automatically log out and come all the way back into the game if you end up getting a couple add-ons via whatever you're using to manage your add-ons. Let's jump into some tips and tricks, and then we'll get out of here. Alright guys, some final tips. These are pretty small things within the game, but they are things that I did want to introduce to you guys. the calendar up here by the minimap. You click on the calendar, you can see guild events, you can make your own events, you can make your own community events. It'll let you sign up and see who's interested in things that are going on. Now, emotes within the game, this is something that's pretty cool. You can type /help and they will list kind of some abilities, kind of things that you can, buttons that you can use, tab, targeting, and it just kind of explains things within the game. For macro help, you can type /macro help and it's the same thing. It'll tell you what you need to do, what you need to type, where it needs to look like. And then you can also do something fun like /dance and your character will start dancing. Just something kind of interesting and funny within the game. Now, mailboxes is something else that some people sometimes don't know about. Now, if you need to find a mailbox, you need to find anything within the game, talking to a guard is going to be your best bet. But this is what a mailbox looks like. 9 times out of 10 they're going to be in a rested area. So because the city of Stormwind is a rested area, there are mailboxes all over the place. But if you end up going into a fresh town or a town that you've never been to before, find the inn, find the rested area. The mailbox is typically going to be just sitting right outside the door. Now, something I did want to mention as well is barbershops. With the recent update in 9.0, you can change virtually everything at the barbershop. You can change your sex. The only thing you can't change is your race. So if you're worried about wanting to make changes after you've already made the character, go to the barbershop, see what changes you can make there before you decide that you need to re-roll completely. Now, the other thing that I want to mention, and if you do most of this you'll find out in the tutorial or Exile's Reach, but you do need to make sure that you're facing your enemy in order to cast spells with them. If you're facing back to them or if they teleport behind you, you will not be able to start any casts. If you're already casting your ability and they end up behind you somehow, whether it's a rogue, shadow stepping behind you, wherever that happens to be, you can turn. If you can flip yourself around fast enough, you can finish the cast before the cast finishes. You'll still cast that ability at that individual. Now, transmog, I mentioned this earlier when we were looking at the collectibles, right? We were down here looking at appearances. If you come up here and you go to what looks like this area here, talk to a guard, they'll send you to a transmog area. You're going to talk to the warp weaver and you're going to say, I want to transmog my gear. And this is the screen that's going to come up. So it's going to be your character on the left hand side with the options of transmogging here on the right. You click on what you want to transmog. So right now I have the legendary ability, right? You're just going to click on what you want to be where. You can click on what you want it to look like, and it'll cost you some gold to make sure that you've got some money, but it's a fun kind of way, and that's why people go transmogging, because you can change your gear and you can change the way that you look. Now, channels within the game, if you type /1, you'll go into like a general, type /2, you'll go into trade chat, but the big thing for me is typing /leave and then the number. So whenever I make a new character, I almost automatically always leave trade chat, or I end up joining it if I'm kind of wanting to see some crazy conversations. If you've never played the game before, trade chat is something where people spam or they can be kind of vulgar. So it's something that if you're not interested in that, type /LEAVE and the number of the channel that you want to leave. If you end up joining a channel later on in the game, you can make the same statement, just /leave and the number of whatever that channel happens to be. Now, we kind of covered the interface, but I wanted to touch base on some other things you can talk about with key binding. Movement keys, you can change your movement keys, you can change your action bar buttons. If you wanted to change, so this action bar that's already on there has 1 through 0 with the dashes and the equal sign. If you want to change the other action bar keys like I have here where I have shifts on them, go to multi action bar and it's actually annotated by where they are located on the screen. So bottom left, bottom right, and then you have your 2 right action bars and then your right action bar 2. Okay, I hope that this guide was helpful. If you guys have any questions or if you want to just communicate with some of the stuff that you saw in this video, come find me on Twitch, come find me on Instagram, and thanks for watching. Subscribe, like, hit that bell, and I will see you guys around. Thanks for hanging out with me.